Good morning. My talk today is on a topic which I think very few students are familiar with, semiotics. I got acquainted with this concept and this discipline while I was doing my MPhil, and later on, when I decided to pursue my PhD, the topic that I was given was the sign systems of Dickens and Dostoevsky, with special reference to the brothers Karamazov and the Great Expectations. Clearly, I was baffled, and I told my guide that I think this is a very uphill task, but he assured me that you will be able to do it. Semiotics is the life of science. It is an extraordinary field of science where once you begin to understand that, you will be able to understand your literature, your space, your surroundings, your environment in a very different way. Of course, one important book that I would encourage every student or listener who is interested in semiotics or will be interested in semiotics once my talk is over is Robert Innes' The Introduction to Semiotics. Almost all thinkers are covered here, from Saussure, Peirce, Jacobson, Gilliam Slave, Eco, René Thom, Chris Thiva, and many others. So this is a very important book, and there are many others. Once you can, I think my intention is that this talk will instigate a probe or research into this area, into this discipline, which is right now neglected. So semiotics, what is semiotics? Semiotics is comparatively a new discipline that understands literary work as a sign system. Its major theorist is Saussure, of course, who in his book A Course in Journal Linguistics calls it a science. He has used the word, this book was published posthumously, let me say that first. His students took whatever notes they took, they compiled it into a book, and this book is A Course in Journal Linguistics. He, of course, used the word semiology. So Saussure's definition some distinction is made between semiotics and semiology. So in Saussure's definition, there is a distinction being made by semiotics and semiology. They are not the same thing. Semiotics can be defined as related to study of the life of science within society. Semiology can be defined as the study of general social psychology and laws which govern science. Semiology can be understood as a larger science of which semiotics can be a part. But it is sometimes difficult to make a distinction between these two terms. Another term of semiotics is semiosis, that is the production of science. Marcel Dennis defines semiosis as the term used to refer to the innate capacity of human beings to produce and understand science of all kinds. He has distinguished between factual semioses and artifactual semioses. Now, artifactual semiosis is the mental capacity to connect the iconic transformation of our bodily experience to each other through the medium of metaphor. The artifactual semiosis is therefore interactional and creative. It goes beyond the linguistic side. Although the theory of signs surfaced first in the theological work of Saint Augustine, who used the term signon and signatum, which became later as signifier and signified, semiotics made a major breakthrough with the writings of Saussure, Peirce, Jacobson, Lacan, and others. Saussure developed his concepts while working on the text of Indology. His major contribution is in establishing that language is a sign systems and these signs operate in difference. Meaning arises from their difference. A sign is made up of two parts. One is the signified, which is the concept, and the signifier, which is the sound image or the psychological imprint of a concept. And signifier refers to the psychological imprint of a sound image. A sign is a bond between these two. Saussure made a radical finding that this bond is arbitrary, which means that every culture, according to its tradition and experiences, determines this bond. Thus, this finding of Saussure also made the possibility of altering the bond and rebonding it creatively. Saussure's I will not go into great detail because there is so many other thinkers, but Saussure's other very important terms are paradigmatic, syntagmatic, synchrony, diachrony. Derrida has criticized Saussure for his logocentrism. For him, Saussure's inclusion of the subject in elaborating his theory makes it logocentric. Derrida believes that the presence of the subject makes Saussure's theory restricted. Saussure's notion of difference is minimized. From this angle, Saussure is not free from psychoanalyzing or the phenomenological connectivity intentionality. Gottdiener has also interpreted Saussure in phenomenological terms. His semiotic theory brackets out the world and exosemiotic structures. Peirce, an American semiotician, has constructed his system while maintaining a relationship with the material subculture. Gottdiener differentiates between the phenomenological, psychological semiotics of Saussure and the culture world-related semiotics of Peirce. Peirce conceived sign as three-part relation, that is, a vehicle that conveys an idea to the mind, which he calls representation, another idea that interprets the sign he calls the interpretant, and an object for which the sign stands. Peirce suggests the sign stands for something to the idea which it produces or modifies, or it is a vehicle conveying into the mind something from without. The importance of Peirce's semiotics is in suggesting that the real material world exists and it plays a role in signification. In other words, behind the interpretants, according to Peirce, there always exists an absolute object. It is obvious that for Peirce, the sign stands for some object because the relation between the representant and the object world is mediated by the interpretant. Peirce has theorized three kinds of sign. One is symbol. Symbol is conventional and regulated by culture. Then there is icon. It's a sign that conveys an idea by virtue of its very close reproduction of the actual object or event. Third is the index. It is an unmotivated sign. Its meaning is not a product of social conventions or codes. Rather, it is established as a sign in the mind of the interpretant through experience or pragmatic understanding of the material world. It was, of course, Roman Jacobson who gave a very fresh understanding of literary semiotics. Jacobson belongs not only to the Moscow semiotic circle, but also later shifted to Prague before coming to the United States. His semiotics is influenced by the symbolist, futurist, Russian formalist, and Prague school activity. He established that many features of the poetic sign belong not only to the science of language, but also to the whole theory of science, that is, general semiotics. Jacobson therefore considers the features of the poetic sign as pan-semiotic. In his very significant essay titled Closing Statement, Linguistic and Poetics, he elaborates poeticalness of the literary sign as the result of focusing on the message for its own sake, which promotes the palpability of science. Jacobson relates the poetic function of the sign to the selection and combination. He says, the poetic function projects the principle of equivalence from the excess of selection to the excess of combination. Equivalence is promoted to the constituent device of the sequence. In this poetic function, according to Jacobson, grammar and rhymes also play an important part. Equivalence is very important category of Jacobson to elaborate the poetic sign. He says, equivalence in sound projected into the sequence as a constitutive principle inevitably involves semantic equivalence. Jacobson has also suggested that similarity superimposed on contiguity imparts to poetry its symbolic meaning. Regarding the referential function, he says that the poetic sign does not obliterate the referent, but makes it ambiguous. Jacobson has also contributed the notion of binarism. With his Marxist background, he developed this notion based on the dialectical opposition of linguistic sounds. This notion also gets close to the notion of clashing signifiers if we use the notion of signifier in Saussure's sense. The semiotic perspective of Saussure, Peirce, and Jacobson shares one feature, that is rationalist bias. This bias makes these semioticians Apollonic. However, Lyotard, in his libidinal economy, asserts that this kind of sign aims at conquest. What he means by conquest is the hegemonic intention of the sign that emerges from its separation from the libidinal. At the most, this sign accomplishes ambiguity, which will still remain within the realm of the Apollonian semantic. Lyotard establishes the sign as the tensor. The tensorial sign functions with differences and not oppositions. Differences are flexible, intersubjective, rooted in the instinctive body. Using Freud's notion in his interpretation of dreams, Lyotard says, signs are not only terms, stages set in relation and made explicit in trail of conquest. They can also be indissociably singular and vain intensities in exodus. Vain intensities here means that signs cannot be fully rationalized. Some libidinal residual defiance remains within them. Lyotard attempts to redefine the sign in terms of libidinal tensor and therefore introduces a radical perspective in semiotic. Merle Ponte is another semiotician who has pushed semiotics beyond the Cartesian kind of rationalism. In his work, Signs, he suggests that the operative language transcends itself. What he means is that the linguistic sign is based in the perceptual body. For that reason, consciousness is carnal awareness. Carnal awareness means in the invisible and pre-subjective thinking of the body. Obviously, Ponte is elaborating semiotic functioning of consciousness in non-Cartesian terms. In one of the chapters in the book under reference, he says language is much more like a sort of being than a means, and that is why it can present something to us so well. What Merle Ponte means by calling language being is its involvement with the life world, or what Husserl calls Lebenswelt. The sign, therefore, according to Merle Ponte, exists with the world. It is located intersubjectively, or it can also be said it inhabits intermediate spaces. Apart from these thinkers who have made such major contributions, there is René, there is Lacan, there is Derrida, who have also contributed in understanding of theory of science. But these are the thinkers who have radically shaped the entire discipline of semiotics. Lyotard and Merle Ponte thus have theorized the sign from a radical libidinal bodily perspective. Some significant contributions to semiotics also have been made by Lacan, Derrida, Kristeva, René, and some others. Thank you.